Hi everyone, I'm Ian Harvey, massage therapist. Today we're going to talk about the scalenes. We're going to talk about the anatomy, we're going to do some self-work, we're going to talk about some contraindications, and then we'll do a demo on a client. If you'd like to skip ahead to any of these pieces, click in the time codes down in the description box. First of all, why would we want to work with the scalenes? Well, they're important. They're involved in the head posture. If you've got head forward posture, the scalenes might be a little shortened. They're involved in inspiration, especially forced inspiration. So if people are breathing into their chest a lot, these might be getting activated a lot more often than in other people and becoming hypertonic. And finally, the scalenes are intimately involved with the health of your brachial plexus. The scalenes can also be the missing link for certain clients. If they're having, say, thoracic outlet syndrome pain, and they've got this shooting stuff going down their arm and nothing's giving them relief, doing some work in the scalenes may finally give them that relief that nothing else has offered. And finally, even if you don't end up working with scalenes on a regular basis, it's still good to become acquainted with them and to lose any fear that you might have about this anterior neck region. If this is just a big endangerment site for you, something that you avoid purposely or avoid because of anxiety, then it can be changing how you do certain strokes. You might be unconsciously staying away from some good muscle. If you do have any concerns about working in this area, hit me up in the comments, we'll talk about it. So let's talk about the anatomy of the scalenes and do some palpation on ourselves. Doing some palpation and some massage on yourself is, in my opinion, one of the best ways of losing some of this fear about the anterior neck. So we have 3 to 4 scalene muscles. Most people just have the anterior, middle, and posterior scalene muscles, but some people have this scalenus minimus muscle, which is weird. About 50% of people have it. These originate from the transverse processes of C2 through C7, and they go down and forward and insert onto the first 2 ribs. In order to find these, first we're going to need to isolate 2 muscles. We're going to need to isolate the SCM. If you would like to know more about the SCM or how to work with it, go check out my SCM video. It'll pop up in a little bubble. But find your SCM, palpate both heads, the deep head and the superficial head, and then move lateral and posterior to that. So we're going this way. And now we need to find levator scapula. To find levator scapula, palpate the very side of your neck, and then you're going to bring your shoulder way forward and then raise it up. You're going to feel 2 things jump out. One is going to be a vertical muscle going straight up and down. That's your levator scapula. You're also going to feel one that's at kind of an angle that is posterior to that big finger-like muscle. That is superior trapezius. So once you've found SCM and you've found levator scapula, between those 2 there will be this triangle where you can access the scalenes. So feel between those 2 muscular landmarks and you'll feel kind of a flat field of guitar strings. They're going to be twangy, they're going to be gristly. Get used to that texture. If you're on that twangy guitar stringy texture, you're on scalenes. You'll notice that levator scapula has its own texture. The sternocleidomastoid has its own texture. So this feel for the texture, I think, is the best way of finding the individual scalenes. Palpate up toward C2. This is going to require shoving SCM anteriorly just a bit. As you get up towards C2, we are at the superiormost attachment sites of the scalenes. Come down, continue feeling that twangy guitar string texture, and dip under this clavicle right here. You're going to feel a pressure pressing back against you. That is the first rib. It's difficult to make out that this is a rib that we're pressing in on, but that's what's pressing back. Now, as you come inferiorly, you're going to be able to palpate a pulse. You're going to feel a pulsing. That's the subclavian artery. So that's not something we'll want to work directly on. In this same area, we've got the brachial plexus exiting from this forest of scalenes. So the brachial plexus is a bunch of these cervical nerves twining together and then going down to innervate the arm. So this passes in between the anterior scalene and the middle scalene most of the time. In some people, it actually perforates the anterior scalene. In a very small proportion of people, it actually goes in front of the anterior scalene. The main thing to know is that this is a place where entrapment can happen. These two scalene muscles, your anterior and the middle, can give it a pinch. And so if these are too tight, either from posture or from overuse, then these could be your culprit for numbness and tingling. So some contraindications, you're going to feel some lymph nodes in this area. I feel a pretty good one right here. They're little lentil-sized bits of squidgy tissue that will try to dodge out from under your finger. Those are supposed to be there. Don't try to work them out. In some people, they'll be a little bit enlarged, or they might be hard. If that's the case, try not to work directly on them. Do avoid them. And because we've got this neurovascular bundle exiting from this forest of muscles right here, this can be a contraindicated area for anyone with compromised circulation. So if they've got atherosclerosis, a history of stroke, or a history of blood clots, consider avoiding this area, especially in adults over the age of 65. This is my friend Vanessa. So when you've got a client in front of you, you can feel how their particular scalenes feel. Once again, palpate for that sternocleidomastoid and come just lateral to that. And you're going to be in front of this levator scapula. So this triangle created by those two muscles is where you're going to find those scalenes. And feel for that interesting twangy texture of the scalenes. See if you can palpate any lymph nodes in here. And notice that as you come more inferior, you're going to feel a pulse, and you're going to feel some sort of structure preventing you from pressing your fingers any further in this direction. Those are the ribs. Those are supposed to be there. When you're working in this anterior neck area, it's important to get informed consent. Let them know that you'd like to work around toward the front of the neck, and ask them to tell you if they're having any discomfort or any anxiety. So that would sound something like this. Vanessa, I'd like to work toward the front of your neck, and I'll show them on myself. I'd like to work toward the front of your neck here. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, if you feel any discomfort here, or if you just don't like the sensation, if you feel anxiety, then do let me know, okay?
No problem.
All right. So I'm going to start. I've got just the tiniest bit of jojoba on my hands, and I'm going to start with broad, flat fingers. I'm just going to introduce this area to pressure. On many clients, this will be the first time that the scalenes have ever been contacted. So go slowly and listen to the sensation coming in from your fingers. Feel for that texture, and notice when you've hit one of those boundaries. So I passed over levator scapula here. That meant that I was no longer on scalenes. I'm going to repeat that. And just come in gently. Let this be an airplane landing. And as you exit this move, let it be a slow takeoff as well. So let this contact be more of a question than a statement. And because I like to come at this from a myofascial perspective, I'll often come below where the scalenes could possibly be. So I'm down on the clavicle, and I'm conforming to the surface of this anterior neck as I draw up this lateral spine. And I can continue that up onto the mastoid process. And as you're doing this, work at an angle. Think of drawing this flat sheet of fascia up northward. Don't worry about trigger points, don't worry about knots. Just think dragging. If you're working at an angle as you do this, all of that neurovasculature and those lymph nodes are not going to be too bothered, especially if you're also working broadly. They'll either dodge out of the way or they'll just be compressed with the rest of the tissue and won't really notice. I can also work transversely, so instead of following those scalenes, I'm going to work across them, and here I'm going to use the flats of my dorsal phalanges, as well as coming into just a bit of my metacarpophalangeal joints, but I'm not going to let these knuckles sink in at all. So think broad and flat. So as I come into this move, I'm dragging the skin laterally. Track your client's face. Make sure that this isn't uncomfortable for them. And Vanessa, do let me know if any of this feels like an uncomfortable skin pulling sensation, okay?
Okay.
That can be the case for some clients. And just go slowly with this. Let the friction between your skin and their skin remain and let it slow you down. We're dragging that tissue transversely and keeping it in a bit of traction. There is some pressure down toward the scalenes themselves, but most of my pressure is angled posteriorly. I'm going around her neck. And this can turn into a nice move that incorporates the levator scapula and the superior traps as well. And you can incorporate movement into this. So Vanessa, I'd like you to very slowly and gently turn your head away from my hand. So turn to the left. And take some nice deep breaths. So this is mobilizing those scalenes independently of each other while I'm tractioning in the other direction. This can give them a sense of freedom in this anterior neck area that they might not get from passive work. And those deeper breaths also activate the scalenes. They're being used to tug on the first and second ribs for chest breathing. And I could repeat that a couple of times. And I can also move on to a little bit of trigger point work. As you search these scalenes for trigger points, stay in good communication with your client, and feel what's under your fingers. If you feel a lymph node, move away. If you feel a strong pulse, move away. Just feel for that twangy texture and let that be your guide to let you know that you're in the right area. And Vanessa, let me know if I find an area of suddenly increased sensation. So I'm just kind of searching these scalenes in a grid pattern, starting medial and moving lateral. You could use a different pattern if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Right there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, do you feel that radiating anywhere?
A little bit into my jaw.
Okay, so some radiation superiorly. So some nice, easy, deep breaths. And let me know when that sensation decreases by about half. So when you find a trigger point like this, you can sit with it until you feel a softening under your hands. You can sit with it for 5 or 10 breaths, or you can have your client let you know when to move on. And something to note is that if you find something that radiates down the arm and you're close to where this brachial plexus exits from these scalenes, then you might just be pressing on the brachial plexus. So I don't do a whole lot of trigger points down here where those nerves exit. If you want to work with this more generally, you can do a myofascial traction out laterally. I do that using my intermediate phalanx here. Did you know that the singular of phalanges is phalanx? It's great. So I use my intermediate phalanx here, and I will traction this skin out laterally. I'll make this as broad a surface as I can. And I'm not pressing in with this knuckle. Again, I'm just using the broad flat of the dorsal surface of that phalanx. Most of my pressure is this way. It's lateral and posterior. I'm not pressing down toward that rib too much. There's definitely some pressure in that direction though. And again, you can incorporate some movement. So Vanessa, I'm going to start that again, and this time I'd like you to turn your head to the left, very slowly. And you can also use fingertips here. You can use thumbs. Just use a nice broad surface. Use what's comfortable for your body and for your hands. And once you become acquainted with these scalenes, you might find yourself incorporating them into some other moves. Like if you're doing some petrissage into the traps, you might bring your thumbs around and have them do that lateral traction along the scalenes. If you're working with the neck, you might find yourself coming a little more anterior than you usually do. So even if you don't do this work on a day-to-day basis, it can change how you do your work otherwise. Alright guys, let me know what you think. Leave me some comments in the comments section. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.